Welcome everybody to February's podcast. This month we are going to be looking at all things South Walney. So Liz and I have been down to the reserve. We're going to have a wander round. We're going to talk to all the people who are involved with running South Walney, because South Walney is a wonderful reserve at all times of the year. So it's a bit of a flavour of winter South Walney. Right, so now we've moved into the visitor cabin, which is a fantastic place where you can get a warm, you can get a cup of tea, and you can learn loads about the reserve. We've got the seal cam showing live pictures of the seals out on the beach. There's the cabin of curiosities, which I think is the most phenomenal place. Just brilliant, of loads of stuff that's been washed up on the beach and some of the real fascinating curiosities that we've seen. And we also have wonderful volunteers who look after our visitors and explain to people where they can go, what they can see, where they're not quite supposed to go as well. And Sue is one of them. This is Sue Hannan. So Sue, tell us a little bit of a flavour about what your day consists of.
I get here usually for 10 o'clock, open up and get the heating on and make sure we've got enough maps and things for visitors. Get the check-in sheet ready, so making sure that I'm ready to welcome visitors and keep the numbers so we know what's going on. Check the tide times, because people always want to know the tide times, get those on the info board, and just generally keep the place tidy and welcoming. Switch on the seal cam and check on my seals, and then wait for visitors to arrive.
Obviously, you'll have some busier days and some quieter days.
Yeah, absolutely. Some days I've had over sort of 50, 60 visitors in a day from all over the world. It's fascinating. And on quieter winter days, depending on the weather, far less. But everybody that comes here because they really want to find out more about what we do and are fascinated by the things they find out.
Go on then. Who's the oddest visitor? Where from?
I've had my first day as a volunteer. One of my visitors was from Bermuda, was over here on holiday and staying at the lighthouse. I was fascinated by how somebody from Bermuda ended up on the end of Walney in the north of England. Today I've had some visitors from Houston, Texas. I've had people from Hong Kong, India, China, and all of the UK, Scotland, Keighley, London. It's fascinating. Of course, lots of Barrow residents as well, which is great. Fantastic.
Right, we're going to leave you be, looking after the visitors, and we're going to go and have a wander round the rest of the reserve.
Enjoy. Do you need me to tell you where to go?
That'd be great. Okay, so one of the things here at South Walney, as the birds come back and start to nest, is the preparation that needs to be done for the nesting season. And we've got with us Becca Watts, who is our assistant warden down here at South Walney. And that's what you're doing at the moment, Becca, isn't it? Is preparations for the breeding season.
Yep, that's right. So at this time of year, it's all about setting up fences, building decoys, making lures, and all the types of things that you would need to attract certain birds to the area, especially things like our migrating birds, like the little terns. You want to put up electric fences to keep them safe.
Those electric fences we were just discussing off mic there, how much work and effort goes in to putting those up each season and then taking them down at the end of the season, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is a lot of effort. It's not a one-person job, that's for sure, and you're covering a lot of area. And the way that we actually do it now is we have 2 fences, so you've got 2 lines of defence there, where we have an internal fence as well, with the idea that the badger or fox will, if he pushes through the wires, will meet a second fence, and that's the new way of sort of keeping those predators at bay.
I don't think people quite understand the amount of work that actually goes into to helping these birds from disturbance and from predators. And you're very artistic, and we've got some of these fantastic lures that you've actually made. We've got a little tern here and a black-headed gull and a herring gull, a juvenile herring gull as well. So Tell us a little bit about how you make these and how they get used.
So the way that they're made, there's 2 different methods here that I've used. So the little tern and the black-headed gull are made in the more traditional method, where I've sculpted the bird in clay, I've cast that in silicone, and then I have to use a 2-part resin to create the actual decoy, and then I have to paint them all by hand and then coat them in something so that the paint stays on when they're exposed to the rain. And the herring gulls are 3D printed, so it's a newer method, but it does take quite a long time to print them, and they are a bit more fragile. So you've got good and bad with both methods. And the reason that we do this is they are used for birds that are colony birds, where they seek strength in numbers. And when you create them, it'll draw the birds in. So, for example, the herring gulls that we use is a newer thing. And we've done it for the last 2 years, where we fenced an area where the gulls used to nest on site many years ago, but haven't for quite a few years. So what I did was brush cut the area, I put cameras in, and then for 2 weeks monitored that area, and there was no attempts to land or nest within that area. But as soon as the gulls were added, within days, real gulls came and were interacting with the decoys and seen doing patrol walks around the edge. So it's a really positive thing. The little terns, they really do seek strength in numbers, and when they migrate, they do their 6,000 miles migration from West Africa. If you have the decoys set up, they'll come in and you'll see that they'll instantly land within the decoys, and then they'll move out into their own pairs. So they're a really popular, successful method.
And it means that not only are we attracting the birds in, but it means that we can try to get the birds to nest in the areas that we've fenced off.
Yeah, that's right.
Because if they go and nest in other areas, then we have to try and think of new ways, don't we? And much less secure temporary fencing to try to fence those other nests off.
Yeah, so it's really good for that, because when they first arrive back, speaking specifically about the little terns, you'll see if you watch them through the camera, they'll interact with the decoys straight away, because the way we put them out will be within pairs and individually, so that they think that there are birds there that are single. And they will land amongst them, they'll call to them. I've got video footage of them trying to bring fish for them, which is a way that they would flirt, basically. And they will nest quite close to them. They usually nest around the edge, but very close. So it's a really good way of giving them that bullseye of, we want you to nest within this safe area so that they're protected from predators.
And specifically about the black-headed gull, we don't have a black-headed gull colony, do we, on Walney? But we'd really like one.
We would really like one, and it's been quite exciting. In the last year that I've used them, we went from having one pair that tried to 7, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's still a very positive thing.
Because the terns really like to have lots of black-headed gulls about, don't they? And where the colonies work really well, it's often with black-headed gulls, so that they can then all protect one another, strength in numbers.
It is, yes. The black-headed gulls are notorious, even though they're quite a small gull, for being very, very protective. And if there's any kind of larger bird, like for a heron, for example, that will come through the area, they will see it off instantly. And that's really good for the little terns, because they're a little bit more mild in nature than the black-headed gulls. So it's a good thing to have a mixed colony if you can. And
the other thing you do is, so not only putting out the model decoys, but you put out sound lures as well, don't you?
Yes. So the sound lures, the way that they work is you have them set to play dawn till dusk, and combined with the decoys, it's a really successful way of bringing colonies in, because you want them to think that they are in a successful area. So if you have a call playing that is just the general chatter of the colony, make sure that you're not using alarm calls, then it goes really well for the birds will be flying above, they'll hear the sound and they'll see the tops of the decoys and they'll think, this is successful, I can join this group.
And so apart from our black-headed gulls and little terns and the large gulls, have we got any other species that we're targeting this year?
Hopefully sandwich terns and Arctic terns, I would quite like to see them, so I can see me making more decoys in the future.
Yeah, fascinating. Thanks so much, Becca. That's such a great insight into the kind of hard work and hard prep that goes on to make a successful, hopefully, breeding season.
Well, thank you.
I don't think many people actually understand that we have the Walney Bird Observatory based down at South Walney and in the shed in the garden, and Walney Birds Obs has been keeping an eye on the birds of the whole island of Walney for many years. And here we've got Colin Raven, who, is it true to say that you do most of the heavy lifting in terms of what goes on at the Bird Obs?
Yeah, I tend to run the observatory these days. There's been a succession of people over the years that have been sort of the mainstay of the observatory, but at the moment I'm the main person that sort of runs it on a daily basis with a sort of backup of additional volunteers that come in from time to time.
And like I said, you're not just bound into South Walney. I mean, we are very much focused about what happens on the reserve here, the south end of the island, but you keep an eye on all the birds over the whole of the island.
Yeah, that's right. basically it's Walney Bird Observatory, so we cover the whole island. It's probably one of the biggest areas to cover of any observatory. I think it's something like 1,362 hectares in size, something like that, the whole island. And we monitor all the birds across the island. There's about 70 species of breeding bird on the island. We usually do a survey of the whole island once every 5 or 6 years to see how they've changed over the years.
How have they changed over the years? Or is that a bit of a big question?
It is quite interesting. There are birds that we don't get anymore that used to breed on the island. Things like corn buntings, yellowhammers, all used to breed, but they don't anymore. Grey partridges are another one that have disappeared. Little owl disappeared fairly recently as well. Right. So it is changing, but we are getting species that we didn't have breeding, of course. Yeah, I mean, there's grey herons breed now. They nest actually on one of the navigation towers in Walney Channel, which is unusual from a heron point of view. It's probably about the only site in Britain where they use that sort of structure to actually nest. But yeah, some of the sort of like the blackcaps are a lot more common on the island now. They used to be a rare breeding species, and they've increased rapidly in the last few years. There's a lot more blackcaps breed, and we recently started to get Chetty's warblers on the island, which again, we haven't proven breeding yet, but hopefully any time now they'll start breeding as well.
The males seem to set up territory and sing anyway, don't they? Whether they've got a partner or not. Yeah,
they do. We think the vast majority of them we've had so far have been females, because we haven't had many males at all. There was one singing last year. This is the first time we've actually had a singing male.
So, I mean, talking of changes, you saw the change then in the gull population down here at South Walney. 40,000 pairs of massive gulls covered the whole reserve. You couldn't leave the car park without protection, kind of thing. And now that's shrunk down to
1,000 to 1,500 pairs at the moment. Right. But that is a slight increase on sort of recent time. The numbers are going up slowly. Probably next year will be the first time when there's a chance that the young that are actually bred here, once the fence went up, will be thinking about returning to their natal colonies. That's when they're probably 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old. Right. Yeah, and then they will start to sort of augment the colony again, and hopefully it will start to develop again.
But what I was really interested in, whether you've seen a change to the rest of the avifauna because of that massive decrease in gulls, because it's not totally dominated by these huge, great aggressive birds anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you're starting to get sort of some of the traditional species back. Things like skylarks and meadow pipits are now starting to increase in numbers on the reserve. They're sort of more common than they were at time of the gulls. When the gulls were, you never really saw a skylark or a meadow pipit actually on the reserve. but now they're starting to appear, and there's sort of things like goldfinches or another one, linnets are starting to come back in the sort of more scrubby areas.
It was one time I was down here and I was gathering evidence to try to stop the English coastal path coming all the way around the reserve, and I met you out at Seahide, and you were with your clicker counting the birds as they come over. And it was then that I started looking at the blog and realising like the ridiculous amounts of migratory birds that can be seen at the right time of year. So that was September, October time going south. But do you get the same movements on the spring migration?
Spring migration generally tends to be smaller than autumn migration. The sort of the geographical position of Walney means that it's more suited to migration in the autumn, with birds being funneled down through the Furness Peninsula and come down on either side of the Furness Peninsula, and the next stop is Walney. So we get a lot more birds moving through in the autumn than we do in the spring.
And then do they head straight over to the Fylde?
Yep, they go straight off out to sea. You sort of see them heading towards Blackpool, down the area. Right.
Because I was just gobsmacked by the terrific amounts of little passerines that are flying over.
Yeah, the sort of the best weather conditions are when you've got a light northerly breeze, which helps the birds on the way. If the wind gets too strong or it's coming from the east, we don't tend to get the big numbers moving through. But on a light northerly, it's some days it's a spectacular sight. We sort of get 10,000 medipipits moving through in the morning and things like that, which is quite phenomenal to watch.
Yeah. It's not like watching huge flocks of waders or starling murmurations move around, is it? It's kind of dribs and drabs, but they're just going and going and going constantly.
Yeah, it's just a steady, constant passage.
Yeah.
It comes in spits and spurts where you suddenly get a rush of several hundred will come through at once, but then it'll slow down again and you get little groups of 10s and 20s. Then there'll be another big mass movement and then it goes quiet again. But generally right through the course of the morning you get sort of the movements going on, then round about dinner time it tends to die off a bit and you can go home and have your breakfast.
Right. Excellent. And then also migration at sea you keep an eye on as well, don't you? Because there's all the seabirds moving up and down the Irish Sea.
Yeah, that's more of a summer activity when the sort of you've got the large movements of Manx shearwaters and gannets moving through from the colonies that spread around the Irish Sea, and you get all the sort of the large tern movements as well from the terns that are breeding up the coast at Hodbarrow. The sandwich terns tend to fly down here every day to feed in the mouth of Cumbria and then go back again.
So you've been involved with the observatory since 1986. So can you give us a bit of a flavour about what the observatory does?
So the main reason the observatory was set up was to monitor passerines. And the way the observatory does that is through observational records and through ringing. So from an observational point of view, you do daily censuses of all the birds in spring and autumn that are moving through the area. And then that's augmented by the ringing. So the ringing mainly takes place in the garden here. And we catch the birds, and that shows again sort of how many birds are moving through. I mean, sort of one prime example would be a willow warbler. In the early days when I was going down here in the 80s, we were catching sort of up to 100 willow warblers in a day if the weather conditions were correct. But now the numbers have dropped off so much that some years we're only catching about that many in a year. So that shows there's a dramatic change in the population levels of the willow warblers that are breeding in northern England. If you're out in the woodlands, you still hear plenty of willow warblers singing in the correct habitat. But going by what we're seeing here, the numbers have dropped off, and there's nowhere near as many as there used to be.
And your ringing, that relies on recoveries, doesn't it? About birds being recaptured elsewhere or birds being found with a ring on them. Go on, what's your best recovery? I mean,
I'll turn that round slightly. Oh. It's as far as to say that there's a wintering flock of light-bellied brent geese that are around the island at this time of the year, and there's probably about 400 or 500 at the peak numbers, and they're from Canada. Yeah. We know they're from Canada because there's a pair that have been around here for the last 10 winters that have got colour rings on. Oh, okay. And they've got sort of these colour rings on that you can actually read using a telescope, and found out that they were ringed on Axel Heiberg Island in the Canadian Arctic. Fantastic. And they've been coming back now for 10 years. That's a sort of a nice thing to see every year, to see they're a pair, and sometimes they've got young with them and sometimes they don't. So that again shows sort of how they're doing from a breeding perspective, and it's always nice to see the pair come back together and follow one another around the island, and they're never more than a few feet apart all year, all winter.
Brilliant, fantastic. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to ask was your thoughts about our presence here at South Walney, because I'm probably going to say this more than once during this podcast, but I'm convinced that the breeding birds, and the wintering and migratory, waders in numbers, that they do so well here because of the policing of the reserve, because we've had wardens down here since the 1960s. So for 60 years, we've been keeping people off the beaches, we've been stopping dogs come along. And I don't know about you, but I've noticed there's so little breeding on some of the beaches north of here, and up the west coast of Cumbria. And we are here and on Walney as well for breeding birds. We're kind of like these isolated islands of less disturbance.
Yeah, I mean, birds have got two motives basically, one to breed, one to feed, and if either of those are affected by disturbance, it causes issues immediately to the populations. I mean, if you were sat at your breakfast table every day and somebody kept walking through your kitchen and scaring you off your breakfast table, you'd soon get fed up and go somewhere else. Yeah. And so from that point of view, the protection, that, especially at the south end of the island, that is now available from the sort of the regular wardening, it has got to be beneficial to the birds and their survival. Yeah, I mean, if you compare the south end to the north end and how few birds are seen at the north end compared to down here, that's where basically it's open access at the north end. Yeah. So you can wander wherever you want, but down here you're limited to the trails, and that's got to be very beneficial to the birds.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody loves to run their dogs on the beach, don't they? And I don't think people quite realise how detrimental that can be to passage birds, wintering birds, breeding birds. You know, all of those birds need times of less disturbance where they can feed, like you say, you know, and to breed without disturbance as well. So,
yeah, I mean, the island in general is well known as a dog walker's paradise. There's the sort of the beaches anywhere from the north end, basically down to the reserve, are so heavily populated by dogs that the breeding birds, such as the oystercatcher and the ring plovers, have very little chance of bringing off any young. They're disturbed on far too regular basis.
And that seems to be the case of the whole of the west coast, doesn't it?
It does.
And we've lost all our little tern colonies up the west coast on the shingle as well.
Yeah. I mean, Walney was the best productive little tern colony in the northwest of England last year.
No, I mean,
it makes the efforts that have been put in worthwhile.
Absolutely. Because even if we didn't have big numbers of birds, we had good productivity, didn't we? Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Well, thanks, Colin. That's absolutely great insight into what goes on here, and I hope people are really interested in that.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So we've moved out onto the reserve now. We're in the Peggy Braithwaite hide, and you might hear the wind whistling through the windows in the background, because it's always windy on Walney. And the Peggy Braithwaite hide, not your normal bird hide. Always worth coming down and having a look, because it's like the cabin of curiosities that we've got in the visitors cabin. It's full of wonderful things to have a look at, interpreting the reserve, the animals and the sea life that we get around here. And it's a wonderful, wonderful spot. And I'm joined here in the Peggy Braithwaite hide by Paul Waterhouse, who is our warden here down at South Walney.
Hi, Joe.
How's it going?
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. So, Paul, first of all, why Peggy Braithwaite?
Well, Peggy Braithwaite was a local lass. I believe she was born on Peel Island, which we can actually see out of the window from here. And Peggy Braithwaite was actually the only female principal lighthouse keeper in Great Britain. And she looked after South Walney Lighthouse for, I think, around 25 years, up until the mid-1990s.
South Walney's got an incredible history, hasn't it?
It's absolutely amazing place, yeah, not just for natural history, but for its cultural history as well, and it's got a real sort of industrial history, and yeah, there's something for everyone at South Walney. As you mentioned, some of the curiosities, the deer antlers that go back to, you know, potentially thousands of years old, and then we've got signs of South Walney in the medieval times was found by the monks of Furness Abbey, and they used South Walney for growing crops.
And you can still see the rig and furrow, can't you, on those fields on the way in?
Which is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and then, like you said, this industrial archaeology, the industrial use of the past, and that's really created a load of the habitat which is brilliant for our wildlife and for our birds.
Yes, so the lagoons, so there's saline lagoons, which lots of the wildlife favour, and you know, is a real hot spot for some of the birds you can see, was actually formed by gravel extraction, sand extraction, and then salt extraction that was sort of in the late 1800s, early 1900s. This was sort of taking place on an industrial sort of level.
Yeah, and there was a pier, wasn't there, which we've seen the timbers of, the old timbers.
That's absolutely right, yeah, so that pier still exists, which was used for taking the materials off the site, yeah.
There's an incredible, more recent history as well with the Second World War emplacements that are on here.
Yeah, so there's lots of infrastructure scattered actually all the way around Walney Island, not just at South Walney. So Walney Island played a really important role in protecting the shipyard in the Second World War. And there was a small RAF base based on Walney Island, which was protecting the shipyard. And there's lots of infrastructure that you can still see today. So bases that searchlights were mounted on and things like that.
We associate South Walney with its bird life. But it's got this fantastic array of habitats as well, hasn't it?
So, yeah, like, you're absolutely right. The variety of habitats is quite special. So we've got all the coastal sort of vegetated shingle, which is, you know, really significant and one of the reasons it's so highly sort of protected. We've got salt marsh, we've got wetland habitats like reed beds and sand dune habitats. And, it's incredibly diverse. And wherever you've got diverse habitats, you obviously have diverse wildlife.
Absolutely, and the flora is fantastic. Coming here in later spring, early summer is just superb, isn't it?
It really is, yeah. So and that's something that's becoming better in recent times. So since the decline of the gull colony from 40,000 pairs, which had a huge effect on the nature reserve, and particularly the botanical side of the nature reserve, it had a huge nutrient input, which obviously isn't ideal for lots of the flora associated with the nature reserve. But since that gull population has declined, the flora has really started to come back, and some of the management Cumbria Wildlife Trust has done such things like turf stripping, which is an experimental sort of land management technique for restoring sand dunes, has all been working really, really well. And although the gull colony has declined, it's opened up opportunities for the habitats to recover, but it's also opened up opportunities for other wildlife to move in as well.
Yeah. I think the turf stripping and getting rid of that nutrient burden, that legacy of the gulls, it was really important, because we had large areas of nettle beds, didn't we, that were not fit for a hell of a lot.
Yeah, it's a technique. So turf stripping is a technical sort of a conservation technique that's been used for quite a few years now, and you take off the top 1.5 foot of sort of nutrient-rich material off the top, which allows the sort of successional processes of the habitat to start again, which lots of the rarer and more scarce flora and wildlife is associated with these sort of early stages of succession.
One of the things that we've got at South Walney that a lot of people don't know about is the whale. And you just reminded me of the whale, because the whale is in that area where we were doing the turf stripping, wasn't it?
It's very nearby, It's very nearby. Well, I hope it's still there. Anyway.
So tell us a little bit about the whale.
So before I started down here, there was a predecessor of mine reported that there was a minke whale that had been washed up on the nature reserve, which does happen from time to time on coastal sites. And if you have a minke whale wash up on your bit of land, you have a responsibility to get rid of the minke whale, which is no mean feat. So one of the only ways you can get rid of a whale is by burying it on site. And that is what our colleague did at the time. This was back in 2019, I believe. So we've had a minke whale buried in the sand dunes at South Walney for quite a few years now, and it's hoped one day that we may be able to make an exhibit of it.
Yeah, I mean, that would be fantastic, wouldn't it? It's digging the whale up and getting somebody to do the meticulous work of wiring it all back together and make a great big 7 metre long
7 to 10 metres, absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
I don't think it would even fit in our visitor centre, so we may have to think of exactly where it's put, but if there's some way of displaying it outside, it would be amazing.
And so amongst all this rich and varied history to do with the reserve is Cumbria Wildlife Trust's involvement, because we've been involved with this reserve a long, long time, haven't we?
It's one of our oldest nature reserves. So Cumbria Wildlife Trust formed in 1962, and we've been looking after South Walney Nature Reserve since 1963, and we've seen lots of changes in that time. Lots of staff coming and going, wardens coming and going. The gull colony historically, when we took over, was in the region of
the reserve, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in, it was in the region of 40,000 pairs of gulls breeding right across the island, and it was one of the most significant gull colonies in the country. But as that gull colony has declined over time, we now see other things arriving. So we've seen changes in land use, we've seen changes in habitats, and we've seen changes in wildlife.
I might have said this before, but I absolutely believe that South Walney is such a great place for wildlife now, as it has been over all that time, because of Cumbria Wildlife Trust's involvement and because of us policing the site and making sure that disturbance is kept to a minimum. I think that's the really important factor that has made South Walney as good as it is today. It's one of the few places where people just can't go and do what they want.
That's absolutely right, yeah. We restrict access to our beaches. There's no dogs on the nature reserve. And because of these restrictions we put in place, the productivity of the wildlife and the birds that are down here far sort of exceeds anywhere else. And research has been done comparing the habitats on North Walney Nature Reserve to South Walney Nature Reserve. And although North Walney Nature Reserve is an amazing place and has some amazing habitats and some wildlife, it doesn't have the restrictions in place that we have and we've had for a very long time. And therefore research has shown that the productivity in South Walney, shore nesting birds in particular, raising chicks and getting chicks to fledge successfully is far greater on South Walney Nature Reserve.
Just walking down here, because we wanted to get a flavour of the reserve, come and sit in one of the highs where we're looking out over these wonderful habitats. Like the wildlife, the bird life has been absolutely superb. I just heard my first skylark singing of the year, which is pretty much, if I get down here, that always happens at South Walney because it's such a good spot for it. But we saw so much else, didn't we, across the pools, and we're at a juncture where all the wintering birds are getting ready to go and move on, and all the summering birds, the gulls start to take up territory already, don't they? The large gulls.
You're absolutely right. The amount of wildlife we saw just on a very short walk down to this hide, which was sort of 20-25 minute walk, is quite something. So we saw red shank, we saw shell ducks, widgeon, all kinds of different wildfowl, and and even from this hide at Peggy Braithwaite, you on a high tide you may even get a chance to look at our seals as well. But it's also a short walk round to Groin Hide, which is the hide that has a direct view over our grey seal colony.
And that the grey seal colony is a wonder, I think, because when I first started, we had a handful of seals were pulling up in the wintertime. And how many were counted this year?
So it's been a record year this year. So South Walney is the only grey seal colony in Cumbria. And we had over 500, I think 560 something seals counted this year, adult seals.
Wow. Yeah.
And they haul out in the autumn and winter to pup. And we also had a record year for seal pups. And I believe that was 14 seal pups this year, which is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I know. Another fantastic success story. And all down to the lack of disturbance. And we do have to say, don't we, that there is still disturbance of the seals, and people approaching by boats, canoes and kayaks can be quite disturbing.
Quite often it's people coming to see the seals, and whether they intentionally or unintentionally get too close, that can have a real sort of detrimental effect on the colony, particularly around the pupping season, because you can scare the mothers into the ocean, and they may not return or may not return in time. So that's something we'd really like to raise the profile of, is sort of really respecting the wildlife, coastal wildlife, whether you're watching it from land or from the ocean itself.
Brill. Well, I really hope that's given everybody a flavour of the reserve and how much there is to see and know about South Walney. So please come on down and have a look. We're just, like I said, on that turning point, that cusp in the year where we're starting to get migratory birds come through. We heard from Colin all about the migration earlier. We start to get birds holding territories and starting to nest. So it's a really interesting time to come. And then we get all the migratory birds that pass through the bay and feed up as they go north. So, if you get a chance, get down to the southwest of the county and come and visit this wonderful, varied reserve. I'd just love to say massive thanks to Paul for showing us around today. Massive thanks to Becca, who makes the lures and looks after all the birds, does the prep. To Sue, one of our wonderful volunteers in the visitor centre, helping people orientate themselves and get around the reserve. And also to Colin with his massive knowledge of the birds of Walney over the years. And as always, massive thanks to Liz for putting the podcast together. And we'll speak to you all in March.